Chapter 1: Loss and Suffering in the Family. Every family dinner felt like a performance, a show where I was nothing more than an extra in the background. As I sat at the head of the table, my fingers absently tracing the rim of my wine glass, I watched Madeline bask in the spotlight, her every word met with praise and admiration. The golden child, the fragile one who had grown up to be flawless in their eyes. Meanwhile, I was always the strong one, the one who didn't need attention, the one who could fend for herself. But what they didn't realize was how exhausting it was to carry that weight, to carry the expectations they'd never vocalized but had always imposed on me. I built my own empire from the ground up, yet here I was, still invisible in the very family I fought so hard for. My success, my struggle, nothing mattered as long as Madeline was the one they saw. But tonight, something shifted inside me. I couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep silencing the anger that had been festering for years. This wasn't just about being overlooked anymore. It was about justice and reclaiming everything they had taken from me. They thought they knew me, thought they had me figured out, but I was about to show them a side of me they had never seen. A side that would demand the respect I deserved. And when it was over, they would understand. Family was never about being the favorite. It was about being seen. And I was finally going to make them see me. I sat at the head of the dinner table, my fingers tracing the rim of my wine glass, pretending to be interested in the conversation. The familiar clink of utensils, the hum of voices around me, my family. As usual. It was a scene I knew well, a routine that had been drilled into me since childhood. Yet tonight, as I listened to Madeline talk about her latest project at the charity she volunteered for, I felt the familiar gnawing sensation in my chest, the one that made me feel like an outsider in my own family. Chapter 2: The Revenge Plan Begins. I had no intention of going back into that house anytime soon, but the truth was, I couldn't stay away forever. There were things I had to do, things that couldn't be ignored any longer. So I threw myself into work. My company, Taylor Realty Group, had been my life for the past 8 years, and it was thriving. But even with the success, there was something gnawing at me, the constant pressure, the feeling that I was still fighting for recognition. Not just from my family, but from the world around me. I sat at my desk late one night, staring at the spreadsheets in front of me, but my mind kept drifting back to the family dinner table, to Madeline, to my mother whose smile still haunted me, warm and satisfied as she praised Madeline like she was the only child in the room. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined to take back what I deserved. But this time, I wouldn't be the one to fight for attention. I would make them see me by making them regret ignoring me for so long. I had a plan. It wasn't going to be loud or chaotic, but it would be effective. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I was going to take it. The first step was to figure out exactly what had been going on behind the scenes. I needed to know how deep the favoritism ran and what my family had been hiding. I wasn't just angry about being overlooked anymore. I wanted to expose the whole web of lies. So I started looking for the cracks. I began with my mother's finances. She had always managed the family's wealth, handling everything with a careful hand, making sure it appeared as though she was always on top of things. But I knew better. I had seen enough of the business side of things to know when something didn't add up. After a few late-night phone calls and some well-placed questions to contacts I had in the business world, I got my hands on a few documents, one of which included a questionable transfer of money from one of the family accounts to a new business venture my mother had never mentioned. It was all too neat, too perfect, like something someone had set up to cover their tracks. I felt a chill creep up my spine. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. But this wasn't the right time to confront them. No, I was going to wait. I would gather everything I needed, and then I'd strike. I would force them to see me. The next morning, I got a call that shifted my focus back to the real world. Ethan Green, a rival real estate mogul I had been up against for years, wanted to meet me. Ethan was the kind of guy who would smile at you and shake your hand, but he was always looking for an edge, always a step ahead. I couldn't afford to let him steal this deal from under me. We were both bidding for the same prime development project in the Mission District of San Francisco, and the stakes were high. Whoever secured the contract would solidify their position as the top real estate firm in the city. I wasn't about to let Ethan win, not after everything I had worked for. I met him in one of those high-rise offices overlooking the bay, the kind of place that screamed success. Ethan was sitting behind a sleek wooden desk, looking as smug as ever. His perfectly tailored suit, the sharp jawline, the easy charm, it all added to his reputation. But I knew better. He wasn't just a pretty face in a fancy suit. He was a shark, and I was the one in his sights. "Good to see you, Kara," he said with that smirk of his, offering a handshake that was just a little too firm. "I've been keeping an eye on Taylor Realty Group. You've been making waves lately. But I have to ask, you really think you can handle this project? It's a big one. It might be too much for you." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Of course he would try to undermine me. That's what Ethan did best. Get under your skin and make you doubt yourself. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Ethan," I said with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "I've handled bigger projects than this one, but if you want to know, I think it's more about who can deliver. And from what I've seen, your team has a lot of flash, but not much substance." His grin faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. "Well, Kara, I guess we'll see who the city trusts when the time comes." I felt the tension rise between us. This wasn't just a business deal. This was personal. Ethan had been trying to edge me out for years, and I wasn't about to let him win this time. "I'll be seeing you at the board meeting next week," I said, standing up and offering him a cool smile. "Let's see who the city really trusts." I left the meeting feeling like I had just come out of a battle. But it wasn't just Ethan I was fighting. It was everything. The family, the business, the way I had been overlooked for so long. I wasn't just fighting for a contract anymore. I was fighting for something bigger. I spent the rest of the day going over the documents I had uncovered about my mother's hidden financial dealings. The more I looked, the clearer it became that something wasn't right. I had all the pieces. Now I just needed to put them together. Once I had everything I needed, I would bring it all to light. I would make them see me. They would have no choice but to recognize me. But I couldn't just rely on my business success or my family's secrets. I had to hit them where they hurt the most, where they least expected it. And that's when it hit me. The perfect plan. I would use Ethan's own methods against him. He thought he was the only one who could play dirty. I was about to show him how it was done. Chapter 3. Uncovering the truth and deciding to act. The more I looked into it, the more I realized I was not just dealing with a family that didn't understand me. I was dealing with a family that had been systematically keeping me in the dark. The documents I had uncovered were just the beginning. The more I dug, the more I found. Hidden transfers of money, unexplained purchases, assets that had been moved around without any notice or explanation. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about control. It was about making sure I never had a voice, never had a say in the family's future. One late afternoon, I finally found what I had been looking for. I had been going through my mother's financial records, quietly gathering evidence, when I came across a series of transactions that didn't make sense. One of them stood out. My mother had sold a significant portion of the family's holdings in a piece of prime real estate in the heart of San Francisco. The transaction was marked as private, and the buyer was listed as an anonymous shell company. The sell price? Well below market value. But what caught my attention wasn't the low price. It was who had received the funds. Madeline. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My heart pounded in my chest as I dug deeper. There were no explanations for why this sale had happened, no approval from me, no mention of it in the family meetings. It was all tucked away, buried under layers of deception. The more I thought about it, the more my blood boiled. My mother, the woman who had always claimed she was doing what was best for the family, had taken a decision without telling me. And to top it off, Madeline, my own sister, was the one benefiting from it. I needed to talk to her. I needed to know how deep this went, and I wasn't going to let her get away with pretending like everything was fine. I was done being the quiet one, the one who always held back and played by their rules. Now, it was my turn. I didn't wait long to confront her. A few days later, we met at a small coffee shop near Union Square. The place was busy, bustling with people going about their day. But as soon as Madeline walked in, everything around me seemed to fade. She was dressed in her usual pastel-colored dress with that perfect hair and flawless makeup. It was as if she had just stepped out of a magazine. When she saw me, she gave me one of those smiles, the kind that made you feel like everything was fine, like there was no tension, no unresolved issues. But I wasn't fooled anymore, not after everything I had uncovered. "Hey, Kara," she said, slipping into the seat across from me. "It's been a while. How's everything going with the business?" "Cut the small talk, Madeline," I said, my voice low but firm. "I know what you've been doing." She blinked, her eyes widening slightly, but she quickly recovered, giving me a soft laugh. "What are you talking about?" I slid the folder I had brought with me across the table, the documents inside it scattered just enough to get her attention. The shock on her face was immediate. "I found the records. The sale of the property, the money transfer. You think I wouldn't find out?" Madeline's hand shook slightly as she reached for the folder, but she quickly regained her composure. She glanced at the papers but didn't say anything right away. Her gaze flickered back to me, her usual calm expression replaced with something colder, more guarded. "Kara, you don't understand," she began, her voice steady but lacking her usual sweetness. "It wasn't like that. Mom was trying to help me to make sure that I would have something for the future. You wouldn't understand. You've always been so focused on your work, your company. You don't know what it's like to struggle the way I have." I felt a rush of anger. "Don't pull that on me, Madeline. I've worked my ass off to get where I am. I've spent years building a company from the ground up while you've been handed everything. Everything, just because you've played the part of the helpless little sister." Her eyes narrowed and she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you think I don't struggle? Do you think it's easy being the one who's always expected to be perfect, to always live up to what Mom and Dad want from me? Do you think I don't see the way they treat you, the way they push you aside?" I froze. For a moment, I thought I saw something real, something raw in her eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced with that familiar, rehearsed mask. She continued, "I didn't do anything wrong. Mom made that decision, and she thought it was the best for us all. You don't know everything." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to play the victim here. You're as much a part of this as she is. Don't try to convince me you didn't know about the sale. Don't try to convince me you didn't know how it was going to affect me." She sat back in her chair, her arms crossed over her chest. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the weight of everything we had never said to each other. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Madeline wasn't just the golden child. She had played me, just like everyone else. She was as complicit in the lies as my mother was. "I didn't want to hurt you, Kara. I really didn't. But I'm not the one to blame here. You have to understand. Mom was doing what she thought was best." I shook my head, unable to contain the frustration building inside me. You don't get it. You never have. You were always the one they chose. And now I'm supposed to just accept it? Just roll over and play nice because it's easier for everyone else? No, Madeline, not anymore. I'm done. Her face softened for a split second before the walls went back up. She leaned in again, her voice low and sincere. Kara, please don't do this. We're family. We've been through so much together. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. I couldn't go back to being the person who let them walk all over me. I had to take control, for once. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, I said, standing up. But I'm done being the forgotten one, and I'm not letting you or anyone else take what's mine. Madeline didn't speak as I turned to leave. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had made my choice. Chapter 4. Facing Family and Justice. I walked out of the coffee shop, my mind racing. I had finally said the words to Madeline that I'd been holding back for years. But I knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. I had made my choice, and now I had to follow through. There was no turning back. Not anymore. I called Samantha as soon as I got into my car. Her voice was calm, as always, when she answered. Kara, what's going on? I need your help, I said, my voice tight with urgency. I've gathered everything I need. I'm ready to bring the truth to light. Good, she replied. Let's meet and go over the details. You're not alone in this. We'll make sure everything is handled legally. I felt a surge of relief hearing her words. Samantha had been my friend since college, and she had always been there when I needed her most. The thought of facing my family alone had been overwhelming, but knowing I had someone like her in my corner made me feel like I wasn't fighting this battle by myself. A few days later, I was sitting in a quiet conference room in Samantha's office, the weight of what I was about to do settling heavily on my shoulders. The evidence was right in front of me: bank records, property transfers, and a stack of documents detailing the hidden transactions my mother and Madeline had been involved in. It was all there. The lies, the deceit, everything I needed to expose them for who they truly were. This is it, Samantha said, flipping through the files. We've got enough here to make a solid case. I just need to get it in front of the right people, I said, rubbing my temples. I'm done waiting. They have to face what they've done. Samantha nodded, her expression serious. You're doing the right thing, Kara. No one should have to live like that. You deserve to be seen and to be heard. I know, I replied, the words feeling like a weight lifted off my chest. I'm not doing this just for me anymore. I'm doing it for everyone they've stepped on along the way. For every moment they've made me feel small. We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Samantha was right. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the years of being overlooked, ignored, and treated like I didn't matter. It was about finally standing up and demanding respect. A week later, I called a family meeting. My parents, Madeline, and the rest of the family were gathered at the house, an old Victorian on the edge of the city. It had always been a symbol of what our family had built, of everything my parents had worked for. But to me, it had never felt like home. Not really. Not when I had always been in the background. I stood in the living room, facing the people who were supposed to be my family, but who had never truly seen me. My father, Henry, sat in his usual chair, his face unreadable. Madeline was there too, sitting next to Mom, her eyes darting around the room as if she could already feel the tension rising. What's this about, Kara? My father asked, his tone flat. We don't usually have these kinds of meetings. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly. I couldn't back down now. This was it. I wasn't going to let them dismiss me anymore. I've been holding back for too long, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. It's time we all faced the truth about what's been going on in this family, about what you've done to me. Mom looked up at me, her expression hardening. What are you talking about? I am talking about the way you've treated me my entire life. I've worked my ass off to build my career, and you've never once acknowledged it. You've always chosen Madeline. You've always put her first. You're being dramatic, Kara, Madeline interjected, her voice full of that familiar, fake sweetness. Mom and Dad love us both. We've always supported you. Don't lie, Madeline, I snapped. You've always had everything handed to you. And Mom, I turned to her, you've always turned a blind eye to it. Mom's face reddened and she stood up, her hands shaking with anger. How dare you accuse me of that? You've always been so difficult, so independent. You never needed us. We've always been here for you, but you've pushed us away. You don't get it, I said, my voice breaking with the weight of everything I had been holding back. You never saw me. You saw Madeline. You always saw her. And now I'm done being invisible. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by the cold realization that this was the only way. I had to do this for myself, for the years of silence, for the years of being ignored. Sit down, Kara, Dad said, his voice sharp. You don't know what you're talking about. I do know, I said, taking a step forward. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been through the records. I know about the property sale, the one you sold behind my back, the one I should have had a say in. You've been using me, using this family to get ahead. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, but they didn't say anything. Madeline remained silent, her mouth slightly open as if she were trying to form words, but couldn't find them. I didn't care. They had no excuse. Now it's time for all of you to face what you've done. You've pushed me aside for years, but not anymore. I'm taking what's mine. Chapter 5: Revenge and Karma. I stood there, the weight of everything I had fought for pressing down on my chest. The documents I had presented, the evidence I had gathered, the truth I had dragged into the light, it was all coming to a head. I had spent so many years living in the shadows, so many years being overlooked, that I almost couldn't believe it was finally happening. The court ruling had just been announced. Taylor Realty Group would now be mine, officially. My mother and Madeline had been forced to face the consequences of their actions, the lies and the hidden deals. The assets that should have been mine, property, stocks, and the family estate, were finally under my control. It wasn't just about the business. It was about justice. It was about getting back what was rightfully mine, but more than that, it was about my freedom. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was suffocating under the weight of expectations. I had fought for my place, for my success, and I had earned it. I walked out of the courthouse, the crisp San Francisco air hitting my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. It was surreal. For so long, I had felt trapped by family, by expectations, by a life I hadn't chosen. But now, everything was different. I had reclaimed my life. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Mom. She'd been trying to call me all morning. I had ignored every call up until this point, but now, I couldn't avoid it any longer. I answered. Kara, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. I never thought it would come to this. I stood there, my heart pounding. For a moment, I felt a flicker of guilt, a brief, fleeting thought of how things could have been different, how I could have been different. But then I remembered all the years of being dismissed, ignored, and treated as if I didn't matter. I had lived for so long in a shadow I didn't choose. I wasn't going to shrink back into it now. "I don't want to hear it, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I don't care what you have to say. You and Madeline had every chance to do the right thing. You chose not to. Now you have to live with the consequences." Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could almost hear her processing my words. Then she spoke again, her voice breaking. "You've taken everything from us, Kara. I didn't want this to happen. I never wanted this to tear us apart. You're my daughter. I love you." I felt a brief ping in my chest, a small, painful ache, but it was fleeting. I couldn't let it control me. Not anymore. "You don't get to play the victim, Mom," I said softly. "Not anymore. You made your choices. I made mine." With that, I hung up the phone and got into my car, the familiar hum of the engine grounding me in the reality of what I had just done. I didn't look back. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk in my office, the weight of the day's events settling in. I had been through so much to get here, to finally take control of my future. The paperwork was all set, the legalities taken care of. Taylor Realty Group was now mine. I had a company to run, a future to build, and a legacy to create. For the first time, I felt like I had finally been free to be who I was meant to be. And yet, a part of me still felt hollow. It was the part of me that had hoped for a different outcome, that had wished for some kind of reconciliation. But deep down, I knew that wasn't possible. Not with them. Not anymore. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the streets below. It was beautiful, but it was also empty, just like the life I had been living. The phone rang again. I didn't even have to check to know who it was. Madeline. She'd been trying to reach me too. I let it ring. It had been hard enough to face her in court. I had wanted to believe she was different, that she hadn't been part of the betrayal, but deep down, I knew she had always been in on it. She had always been her mother's favorite, and now she was reaping the consequences of that favoritism. She got it all handed to her while I was left fighting for scraps. And now that I had taken back what was mine, I wasn't going to let her get away with pretending like she didn't play a part. She had her chance. They both did. I took a deep breath and turned my attention back to the paperwork in front of me. It was time to move forward, to take control of what was mine. I had fought hard to get here, and I wasn't about to let anything or anyone take it away. A few hours later, I stood in front of the mirror in my office, the city lights flickering through the window behind me. I studied my reflection, taking in the woman staring back at me, strong, resilient. Someone who had been knocked down but had fought back harder than anyone thought possible. I smiled to myself, the first real smile I had allowed myself in a long time. For the first time, I felt like I had truly earned my place in this world, not because of my family's name or legacy, but because of everything I had built with my own two hands. I took what was mine, and no one could take that away from me.